Hi there and welcome to My Week. I'm Christy McDonald. We are glad that you're settling in with us tonight. There is a lot to get to. We're going to take a look at outgoing Detroit Mayor Dave Bing's legacy tonight. Plus, is Michigan any different 1 year after right to work? But we do start tonight with a fight over so-called dark money campaigns in Michigan. We all see the issue ads in an election year. Are we entitled to know who pays for them? A new campaign finance bill out of Lansing would keep donors' names private. And the fight is lining up on two sides, freedom of speech versus transparency. And how could it affect the 2014 election year here in Michigan? Let's get started right there with our contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Gentlemen, how are you?
Merry Christmas.
Well, thank you very much. Right. And to both
end of the year.
We're wrapping towards the end of the year, but it's still kind of busy in Lansing, and the governor has to make a decision about this campaign finance bill. What do you think he's going to do?
Oh, I think he signs the bill. I don't think he's got serious issues with the bill. I think it fits in with established law, with Supreme Court rulings. I think, he's not going to fight with the legislature over this one.
Should he have serious issues with this bill? And why does it come down to free speech versus transparency?
Well, it doesn't come down to free speech versus transparency. That's all a complete fiction, dreamed up by big money who wants to not say who they are.
Supported by the U.S. Supreme Court.
It's not supported by the U.S. Supreme Court. What the U.S. Supreme Court said in that case was that in a specific instance where donors had reason to fear retribution against them for giving money, in the case that everyone cites, it's a civil rights organization. It's the NAACP at a time when people were killing black people for standing up for their rights. Do these corporate donors have that issue? Do they have that fear?
And as we've seen in other places, you have interest groups taking these names of donors, using it to personally harass them, to boycott and attack their companies.
Remotely the same thing.
You should be able to participate in the political process without fear of that sort of retribution.
But you should not be able to participate in the political process anonymously unless you have an affirmative reason to.
So Steve, are unions going to say, okay, here are all the people who contributed to our PAC?
I think they should.
They don't.
I think the rules should be. I think the rules should be the same across the board.
They never do.
But
they never are.
What the corporations don't want is any sort of disclosure at all of this unbelievable mound of money that they are now stockpiling to put into elections.
Let's back up. Why don't you give people an idea of how much of this money is actually being spent in Michigan and how it does impact them? Because I'm not quite sure people realize how much money is going through here in an election cycle based on these issue campaigns.
Well, almost all of these numbers that you hear about the upcoming campaigns, let's say the Senate campaign or the gubernatorial campaign, include tens of millions of dollars in these third-party contributions is what you call them. And so they are not supposedly being spent on behalf of a candidate. They are being spent by independent organizations that are issue-oriented. But of course, what we've seen over and over again is that these issue-based organizations are aligned with candidates. They are very much for one person or another. So it's difficult to sort of separate, what money is independent and what money is aligned with a candidate. What the Supreme Court did with this case a few years ago was sort of pull all the stops out of that side of the equation. So you can do it in an unlimited manner and not say at all where you're getting the money.
All right, so this was passed in the legislature. The governor has to make a decision. We have taped the show a little bit earlier, so we could have made a decision by the time that we hit the air. Why shouldn't the governor support this? Why should he veto this, Stephen?
Well, I mean, he should send a message that says, look, we need to be much more transparent. This is a guy who ran, again, talking very big about transparency and the idea of accountability. And this bill doesn't assure that. This bill allows you to still cloak yourself and participate in the political process. It should mean something to him that bill has that flaw. And I don't think he has the votes to, if he vetoes it, I bet they could probably override it because this is such a crazy caucus that he's dealing with. But I think just as a matter of principle, this is a guy who has stood up over and over again and talked about how important transparency is to him. I don't see how you sign a bill that enshrines secrecy.
he's not going to cut himself off from $10–15 million in an election year.
So then he's a bigger hypocrite if it's about his money.
It's just not going to happen. I mean, he's not going to veto this bill. He's not going to go against his own caucus on something like this. There are other fights he may choose, but I don't think he's going to choose this.
So then all the stuff he said when he ran about being transparent and being open and all that stuff, then it was nothing. It was campaign.
A lot of that going around, Steve. You probably spent some time talking to the president.
All right, so let me ask you this: if you think that this is such a huge issue for him, and going back on things that he said, do you think this is going to resonate with voters at all?
I don't know. I mean, we're a year from the election. You know, the choice voters will have to make in November is between Rick Snyder and somebody else. And I always think that that's the choice they're making. They're not really thinking about what did you do 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Very hard to make a campaign about those things. But I'll tell you this, we will be reminding voters throughout the year of the various ways in which this governor has said one thing and done another, which is a disappointment. It doesn't mean he's been a bad governor. I think he's been, on balance, a pretty decent leader of the state. But this is a guy who has a problem with promising one thing and doing another, and it's disappointing.
Well, and the guy he'll be running against will be stuffing his campaign with that same sort of money, with unlimited and unaccounted for union funds and what have you. There are no pure candidates in this thing. There are no clean hands in this thing.
There's a difference between a candidate who stands up and says, I am different. Rick Snyder 4 years ago said over and over again how much he was going to do things differently.
And said that?
Well,
hope and change.
I don't think.
Come on.
But this was a specific promise about transparency and openness and the lack of secrecy. And I think to just sort of abandon that the way he is here because he's got this crazy caucus to deal with shows weakness.
This has nothing to do with the crazy caucus. This is a caucus.
Okay, now you guys have
and
said
a governor,
crazy
by the way.
I
haven't.
Three
no,
times
he
now.
said it.
I'm saying
you
crazy
want to see
caucus.
crazy caucus? Look at Gretchen Whitmer and the Senate Democrats.
Well, there's only 12 Democrats. They have no power to do anything. They have nothing to do with it.
That's because they are so outside the mainstream and have set themselves up as a bunch of screamers
that have been drawn by Republicans.
She would rather stand outside the Capitol and shout at it than go in and accept an invitation to work with the governor to help craft legislation. That invitation's been extended many times, and she would rather stand out and shout at the Dome.
Well, all right, let me bring it right back around. Is the last look at here at this campaign finance bill? How is this going to affect the election next year?
Well, I mean, again, it's
in
about
terms of how much money is spent in the
state. It's not about the amount of money. It's about how much money we can account for. It's about how much money we know where it comes from and who's spending it and why. This could have changed the face of that next year significantly. It could have given us a much clearer picture of who's behind these campaigns.
All right.